Hey everybody, in this video we're going to go through this recent article that's titled "Share of Democratic Registration is Declining, but what does it mean?" Virtually every group of voters under 70 has become less likely to register as Democrats compared with Republicans since 2019. This is something we've heard over the past few years. New voters are not as supportive of the Democrats as they were in the past, but does that necessarily mean Republicans are going to be able to capitalize? There's different variables to take a look at, so let's read through most of this article and see where things are at. So we've got newly registered voters who are disproportionately young and non-white have tended to lean Democratic. That's something that pretty much everybody who knows the slightest thing about politics would agree with, but that's less and less true during the Biden era. A majority of states asked people to select a party affiliation when they registered, and last year newly registered Democrats made up only about 53% of those who chose a major party, beating Republican signups by a narrow margin of 26% to 23% of total registrations. And they get this data from L2, that's a nonpartisan voter data vendor. I looked into them a little bit. They do have some stuff that requires a subscription, but the central point here is things are moving away from the Democrats. That's something I've heard over and over. So we've got a graph here that says share of major party registrants who were Democratic. Amongst all of them, in 2019 it was at 58, but then it drops off. And that's true with every age group. 18 to 29 goes from 63 to 57. 30 to 54-year-olds go from 59 to 54. 45 to 64 go from 51 to 46. And 65 and up, that's the smallest drop, but it goes from 50 to 47. It goes on to say the tepid Democratic numbers among new registrants are a small but surprising part of Donald J. Trump's narrow lead in the early polls. Taking the last two national New York Times, Siena College polls together, President Biden leads by less than a percentage point among voters who say they voted in 2020, but he trails by 23 points among voters who say they did not vote in 2020, and about one-third of those non-voters are new registrants who are not offering Democrats their usual support. So with the national polls, it's still only March. I think we should at least get into May or June before we start taking it super seriously. But just because it's early, I don't think Biden and the Democrats should not have any concern either. Clearly, whatever the party in question is, if your voter registration across the board is down 5 points, there's definitely nothing to celebrate about that. And if you're down by 23 points for voters that did not vote in the last presidential election, that would be hugely concerning at this point. The article goes on to say the party's underperformance among newly registered voters is all the more striking given the demographic makeup of the new registrants. Half are younger than 30 and half are non-white. Yet they're less Democratic than the older and whiter voters already registered in these same states with party registration. And those states with party registration are more Democratic than the nation as a whole. They voted for President Biden by 9 points on average in 2020. So if Democratic registrations have only a 3-point edge in those states, that might not bode well for the party nationwide. So a natural question to have is, why is this happening? Voter registration data can be weird. It can be influenced by events that spur new registrations, like the run-up to a presidential primary or a Supreme Court decision like the overturning of Roe versus Wade. In those cases, shifts in voter registration might not have any long-term meaning. New voter registration also draws from an out-of-the-ordinary group of people, those previously unregistered, those newly eligible, and people re-registering at a new address. Trends among these voters may not be representative of the broader population. As a result, the numbers are not as clear-cut as they might seem. The best case for Republicans is that it confirms the deterioration in a Democratic standing among young and non-white voters shown in national polls. So if you look at this chart, this shows you the same as the previous table, except it has every age up to age 80. And outside of a few ages in their 70s, it's pretty clear that these lines all dramatically go away from the Democrats. Now, the silver lining for Democrats is in the following paragraph. It says most of the decline in Democratic numbers is yielding an increase in the independent share of registrants, not a surge in Republican registrants. They don't know much about these unaffiliated voters, but given that many of them are from traditionally left-of-center groups, young and non-white, the party can hope they're still Democratic-leaning even if they don't call themselves Democrats. So this could just be a rise in the unaffiliated voter. There's certainly appeal in not wanting to associate yourself exclusively with the Democratic or Republican Party, but when it comes time to vote, much of that allegiance might still carry over. It also says that a related possibility is that the declining Democratic strength reflects the idiosyncrasies of what might have driven voter registration in 2019 versus 23. What they mean is the Democratic presidential primary in 2020 and the Republican one in 2024. It would make sense if partisans were likelier to register ahead of their party's presidential primary, and that would have helped Democrats in 19 while helping Republicans in 23. Similarly, many independent-minded Democrats might have been likelier to register as Democrats in 2019 to ensure their eligibility to vote in the upcoming Democratic contest. This kind of explanation would leave open the possibility that Democrats are poised to enjoy a surge in registration in 2024 after a non-competitive primary but ahead of the general election. I think that is a valid point. However, in 2023 and 4, the Republicans had a little bit more competitive primary than the Democrats, but overall it wasn't really seriously competitive. Some Democrats might have even re-registered as independents or even Republicans to support Nikki Haley against Trump in some of these primary states. Another intriguing possibility is that the Republican strength today is a function of Democratic registration in the past. Imagine, for instance, that resistance voters opposed to Mr. Trump were highly motivated to register during the Trump years. If so, the remaining pool of non-registrants would be disproportionately composed of voters who weren't energized to resist Mr. Trump. At a certain point, new registrants would become relatively Trump-friendly. It goes on to say this explanation is supported by one oddity in the data. If you look carefully at the chart, you'll notice that the registration decline for Democrats isn't very big among those 18 to 21, but the shift is much larger in those 22 and older. This basic pattern could be explained if the anti-Trump registration already drained the pool of potential anti-Trump voters among those eligible in 2020. But the anti-Trump voters who were too young in 2019 could register for the first time in 2023. So that is interesting, but I think it's going to be more complex. I don't think there's going to be one clear-cut answer. Maybe there are a ton of new anti-Trump voters that were not able to vote in the last election, but maybe there's less of them this time than there would be in the past. The last part here says 2023 was actually the most Democratic year of the Biden administration for new registration among voters over 65, and it was the worst year of the Biden administration for those under 30. That's a pattern they're seeing in the polls. It's hard to explain why it would show up in registration data if there weren't some kind of change in the public opinion. So that's what we've got. There's no question that if you look at this data, you would rather be the Republicans than the Democrats. If almost every single age group is going away from your party, that cannot be a good sign. However, I suspect a lot of those voters just want to be unaffiliated because they don't feel allegiance to either party. But this is not a one-off poll showing a shift away from the Democrats. The problem for Republicans is Democrats can easily point to the midterms and special elections and abortion and say that they've got an advantage once people actually come out there and cast their vote. There's definitely data there for each side to brag about. If the roles were reversed, both sides would say the exact same thing the other side is saying today. But even if there was no mystery in the data and it was clear what was happening, the election is still just way too far off to draw any solid conclusions. People who watch this video probably follow politics at least moderately, but most people I don't think follow politics that closely. And once November rolls around, the electoral landscape might look completely different. I think either side can win, and whoever wins, it's probably not going to be by a significant margin. But whatever polling we see in March or April or even May, just try to remember to expect the unexpected and know that things can change. I'm going to leave it there for now, so let me know in the comments. What do you think about this voter registration shift? Is it definitely a major concern for the Democrats, or does it not matter that much because of the special election results? And how do you think the data will change this year? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.